Kimi Antonelli walked away from Hungary qualifying with 4th place. Then the FIA opened the data, found a speed reduction of less than 1% under yellow flags, and dropped him all the way to 7th. 3 grid positions gone. 1 penalty point added to his super license. And suddenly, the championship leader is starting behind Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Verstappen, Hamilton, and his own Mercedes teammate, George Russell. But here is the bombshell. Antonelli's mini-sector was only 0.03 of a second slower than his best, and his speed at the incident point was actually slightly higher than on his previous fastest lap. The recommended punishment was 5 places. The stewards reduced it to 3 because Verstappen's spin happened suddenly, and Antonelli had limited time to react. Now, with a 45-point championship lead and one of the hardest recovery races of his season ahead, Antonelli faces a brutal choice. Attack immediately, and risk making everything worse. Wait too long, and watch his rivals disappear. And the most dangerous part of this penalty may not be where he starts. It may be what 7th place forces him to do before the first lap is even over. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this penalty changes everything, you have to go back to the final moments of qualifying. Antonelli was running directly behind Max Verstappen as the session reached its most important point. Every driver was chasing the fastest possible lap. Every fraction of a second mattered. Then Verstappen spun at the final corner, turn 14. That instantly created a yellow flag situation. And in Formula 1, a yellow flag is not a suggestion. It means danger ahead. Slow down. Be prepared for something unexpected. Antonelli did react. The stewards accepted that he made an effort. But when they examined the data, they decided the reaction was too small and too brief. This is where the case became difficult for him. His mini-sector was only 0.03 of a second slower than his previous best. His total speed reduction was less than 1%. And at the exact point of the incident, he was traveling slightly faster than he had been on his earlier quickest lap. That detail is devastating. Because the FIA was not simply asking whether Antonelli touched the brakes. The stewards were asking whether his speed changed enough to show a clear response to the danger. Their answer was no. The official guidelines suggested a 5-place grid penalty. But Antonelli received 3. That reduction matters. The stewards considered the sudden nature of Verstappen's spin. They accepted that Antonelli had limited time and distance to react. They also recognized that he did reduce his speed, even though the reduction was not sustained. So this was not the harshest punishment available. But it was still enough to destroy the position Antonelli had earned. 4th place became 7th. And 7th place creates a completely different race. Instead of starting close to the front, Antonelli now lines up behind Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and George Russell. That is not ordinary traffic. Those are some of the fastest and most aggressive drivers on the grid. From 4th, Antonelli could have focused on the podium. From 7th, he must first survive the opening lap, protect the tires, and find a way past cars that will not give him anything for free. And the Hungaroring makes that challenge even worse. This is a narrow circuit. The corners arrive quickly. Following another car closely can disturb the air reaching the front wing, reducing grip and making overtaking far more difficult. It is like trying to sprint through a crowded hallway. You may be faster than everyone in front of you, but speed means nothing when there is no space to move. That is the problem Antonelli now faces. He may have the pace to recover. But having pace and being able to use it are 2 completely different things. And there is another layer of pressure. Antonelli arrives in Hungary as the championship leader, 45 points ahead of Hamilton, after winning in Belgium 1 week earlier. That advantage gives him breathing room. But it also gives every rival a target. Hamilton starts ahead of him. Both McLaren start ahead of him. Leclerc starts ahead of him. Verstappen starts ahead of him. Even Russell, his own teammate, starts ahead of him. Every one of those positions matters. Antonelli cannot afford to panic. But he cannot afford to wait forever either. Attack too early, and he could damage the tires or create contact. Wait too long, and the leaders may disappear before Mercedes can use strategy to bring him back into the fight. That is the trap created by the penalty. And it does not end with the grid drop. Antonelli also received 1 penalty point on his super license. He is still far from the 12-point limit that would trigger an automatic race suspension, but the point remains on his record. He also received a warning for driving too slowly and exceeding the required minimum delta time on his in-lap after the session. So 1 qualifying session left him with 3 separate consequences: a grid penalty, a license point, and a formal warning. The most important question now is not whether the FIA punished Antonelli. That decision is already made. The real question is whether he can stop that punishment from controlling the rest of his weekend. Because 7th place is only where the damage begins. And that damage now moves from the steward's room to the racetrack. Starting 7th means Antonelli is no longer beginning the Grand Prix in clear reach of the front row. He is beginning inside a line of cars that can shape his entire race before Mercedes even has time to react. Norris starts first. Leclerc starts second. Piastri starts third. Verstappen starts fourth. Hamilton starts fifth. Russell starts sixth. Then comes Antonelli. That order matters because every car ahead of him creates a different problem. The McLarens and Ferrari showed some of the strongest pace of the weekend. Verstappen is one of the hardest drivers on the grid to pass. Hamilton is Antonelli's closest championship rival. And Russell is his own teammate. So Antonelli is not simply trying to recover 3 positions. He is trying to recover them against drivers who all have something important to protect. That is what turns the penalty into a much bigger problem. If Antonelli gets a strong launch, he may have an opportunity into the opening corner. But the first turn in Hungary compresses the field quickly. Cars arrive side by side. Drivers defend the inside. Space disappears. One clean move could begin the recovery. One desperate move could end it. And that is the balance Antonelli now has to manage. He cannot treat every position as an emergency. But he also cannot allow the leaders to escape. This is where the 45-point championship advantage becomes both a strength and a burden. The advantage means Antonelli does not need to gamble everything in one race. He can still protect the bigger picture. A difficult Sunday would not remove him from the lead. But championship leaders do not think only about survival. They think about momentum. Hamilton starts ahead of him. If Hamilton finishes strongly while Antonelli remains trapped, the gap begins to shrink. It may still be comfortable, but the emotional direction of the title fight changes. That matters. A lead feels powerful when it is growing. It feels less secure when a rival begins taking points away. And that could create pressure inside the Mercedes garage. Antonelli may feel he needs to clear Russell quickly. Russell may feel he earned 6th place and deserves to race freely. Mercedes may want both drivers to avoid wasting time against each other. There is no simple answer. If the team allows them to fight, they could damage their tires and lose ground to Hamilton and Verstappen. If Mercedes asks Russell to move aside, it may protect Antonelli's championship interests, but it could create frustration inside the team. And if Antonelli cannot pass Russell on pure pace, the penalty becomes even more painful. Because the first car blocking his recovery would not be a rival. It would be the other Mercedes. That is where strategy could become decisive. Mercedes may try to use the pit stop window to separate the two drivers. Antonelli could stop earlier, attempt to find clean air, and use fresh tires to gain time. But an early stop comes with a price. The final stint becomes longer. The tires must survive more laps. And if Antonelli uses too much grip trying to recover, he could become vulnerable near the end of the race. Mercedes could also leave him out longer. That might give him fresher tires later, when overtaking becomes easier. But if he spends the opening phase trapped in traffic, the leaders may already be too far ahead. That is the strategic trap created by 7th place. Every solution creates another risk. And there is one more detail that makes the situation even harder. Antonelli's penalty came from failing to slow sufficiently under yellow flags. The stewards reduced the expected 5-place punishment to 3 because he had limited time to react, and because he did make some reduction in speed. That means Antonelli avoided an even worse starting position. But it also means the FIA believed the data left no room to remove the punishment completely. His speed reduction was less than 1%. His mini-sector was only 0.03 of a second slower than his best. And his speed at the incident point was slightly higher than on his previous fastest lap. Those figures are not dramatic because they are large. They are dramatic because they are so small. The yellow flag appeared. But the data showed almost no meaningful change. That is why the stewards acted. And for Antonelli, that creates a difficult emotional problem. He knows the incident happened suddenly. He knows he had limited time. He knows he made some attempt to respond. But he also knows the numbers were not strong enough to defend the lap. That can create frustration. And frustration is dangerous when a driver begins the race surrounded by pressure. Antonelli must now prove that the penalty does not define his Sunday. He must manage the opening lap. He must protect the tires. He must avoid contact with Russell. He must remain close enough to Hamilton to limit the championship damage. And he must do all of it while carrying another penalty point on his super license. That point does not create an immediate threat of suspension. The automatic ban only arrives at 12 points within 12 months, and Antonelli remains well below that level. But the point still matters. It stays on his record. It joins the penalties he already carried from incidents during his rookie season. And every future investigation will feel slightly more important because of it. This is the deeper consequence of Hungary. The 3-place drop affects one race. The license point follows him beyond it. So Antonelli is now being asked to do something incredibly difficult. Race aggressively enough to recover. Race carefully enough to avoid another incident. That contradiction could define his entire afternoon. And the longer he remains in 7th, the more pressure it creates. The more pressure he feels, the more tempting it becomes to force a move. The more he forces the race, the greater the risk of turning a difficult penalty into a genuine disaster. That is why the first phase of the Grand Prix may tell us everything. If Antonelli stays calm, preserves the tires, and waits for the race to open, Mercedes may still find a route back toward the front. If he attacks without control, the penalty could become only the beginning of the damage. Because the FIA has already decided where Antonelli starts. What happens after that will reveal whether he still controls the championship, or whether the championship pressure is beginning to control him. But the pressure on Antonelli does not end with the opening lap. Even if he avoids contact, keeps the car clean, and holds 7th place, the penalty can still follow him deep into the race. That is because every lap behind another car changes what Mercedes can do next. The team cannot simply choose the fastest strategy on paper. It must choose the fastest strategy available inside traffic. And those are not always the same thing. From 4th place, Antonelli might have been able to follow the leaders, protect his tires, and wait for the pit window to develop naturally. From 7th, Mercedes may be forced to react much earlier. One driver pits. Another stays out. A gap appears for only a few seconds. Then it disappears. That is how quickly the race can turn. Mercedes must watch Russell ahead, the cars surrounding Hamilton, and the traffic further down the field. Because bringing Antonelli into the pits at the wrong moment could place him behind slower cars, leaving him with fresh tires but nowhere to use them. It would be like changing into faster running shoes, then stepping directly into a crowded queue.